Welcome back to this UpGoWise Masterclass Explainer. Today, we're dissecting a truly foundational text, one with, frankly, incredible structural clarity. We're looking at Limits to Growth, written by Donella H. Meadows, Dennis L. Meadows, Jorgen Randers, and William W. Behrens III. Now, right off the bat, I want to establish something absolutely crucial. Limits to Growth is not a doom book. Not at all. It's a mirror. It is a highly precise clinical mirror for your own nervous system. It basically asks whether your private ambition actually has any real feedback. Because as we know in this practice, self-mastery, it's systems mastery. Look at the graph before it bends. In this explainer, we're going to trace three crucial threads. The first one is a bit painful. What looks like judgment to you, well, it might just be late feedback. The second is a little stranger. Speed can actually completely hide a broken architecture. And the third one is quiet. The limit you deny eventually becomes your exact teacher. You see, we're treating this book as a strategy text, not for nations, at least not first, but for the nervous system that just keeps quietly telling you, just one more push. The author's lens here is just absolutely fascinating. They use system dynamics to map reality, and their absolute core rule is methodological restraint. Essentially, do not debate one single variable while completely ignoring the loop that moves it. They built this on the systems thinking of peers like J.W. Forrester and Kenneth Boulding, the folks who championed the spaceship Earth concept of closed systems. And in doing so, they actively disputed that Julian Simon-style cornucopian optimism, that really dangerous idea that innovation can just outrun absolutely any constraint. Instead, they prove that collapse often looks completely 100% rational when you're viewing it from inside the system. So the crucial point we have to understand is this. You call it high standards, but the mechanism is runaway delay. You see, a closed system has limited shelves, limited lungs, soil, sleep, patience, trust. And when those invisible stocks are treated as just an endless background, your body ends up paying in advance. Control without feedback becomes strain. Strain becomes heat, and heat becomes distortion. You can literally feel it in your jaw, right? This is exactly what unmeasured effort draws down. This book matters because it fundamentally changes the unit of analysis. Not the task, not the month, the loop. A loop remembers exactly what pride forgets. So what is your loop remembering right now? The habit of pressing harder turns delay into evidence against you. That invisible critic sits right behind your ribs, telling you that every single bad result just proves a flaw in you. One paradigm says life is a straight road, but the other says life is a set of linked tanks. One tank fills up, while another silently drains. One win quietly borrows from an entirely different field. One delay completely hides the leak. In strategy, this matters deeply. A leader can gain revenue, yet spend trust without ever noticing they did it. A person can collect all sorts of options, but entirely lose their appetite. The old model worships motion. The systems model asks what motion feeds. That word is not soft. It is purely mechanical. Every single action feeds. Attention feeds skill. Distraction feeds noise. Pressure feeds compliance. Rest feeds range. This whole dynamic exposes the core concept of stocks and flows. See, when you miss the stock, you misread the person. You end up judging the symptom, like, say, a dry mouth before a meeting or a flat, dead voice on a phone call, all because you cannot see the reservoir beneath it. And speed just becomes a mask to hide this broken architecture. You move fast because stillness would reveal that the calendar is packed, the chest is tight, and the mind is clicking like a hot pipe. The straight road seeks blame, but the system seeks delay. Most people think a limit appears as a brick wall. It does not. A limit actually often appears first as a massive win. The first orders ship, the first praise arrives, the month feels completely clean. Those very first gains numb you to the delayed cost. And that brings us directly to overshoot. Simply put, crossing a limit before detection. The curve bends later. The actual cost of success arrives wearing a completely different face. Extending a curve without ever asking what it consumes, that is exactly how we break the system. I want you to picture a late-night lab at MIT. A green and white computer printout is sliding across a desk. The line climbs with this calm, steady precision, and then it tilts, it buckles, and it drops. No villain walks into the room. No thunder announces the turn. The curve only obeys the invisible loop that created it in the first place. Someone has to sit there, in the quiet and let the paper accuse the strategy. So here at UpGoWise, we like to shift the analogy over to architecture. Think about it. A tower is not judged by its height first. It's judged by its load path. Where exactly does the weight travel? Well, your inner life has load paths too. Your attention bears weight, your sleep bears weight, your closest bond bears weight, your very name bears weight. These are the hidden structural supports that carry the heavy weight of your ambition.
A strategy without limits is not bold, is simply uninstrumented. Which beam are you asking to carry absolutely everything?
This is exactly where limits to growth becomes incredibly intimate. The ego asks for more capacity. The system asks for better feedback. We are actively exposing the fantasy of consequence-free increase. You ask for more reading, more work, more commitments from a fresh morning body. But then evening arrives. The hands shake, the tone sharpens, the body eventually refuses the mind's theories of relentless, endless growth.
So we arrive at instrumented ambition. Speed hit a broken architecture. The problem wasn't a lack of force. The problem was that your force had no map. In strategy, the brutal but kind upgrade is that you must regenerate stocks before adding inputs or leverage. You regenerate attention before adding input. You regenerate trust before adding leverage. Regenerate judgment before adding choice. And regenerate silence before adding advice. A living system is not improved by extraction. Your gifts are not exempt from physics. Your pure intelligence can become a mining machine. It can dig reasons out of every single warning sign. It can defend the exact habit that is bleeding. That is the hidden danger of judgment. It feels moral, it sounds adult, but it just keeps the destructive loop perfectly intact. And this brings us to the peak insight. What looked like judgment was actually just late feedback. The ache in your chest, that wasn't weakness. The resentment wasn't immaturity. The missed signal had just been speaking through the body. Limits to Growth by Daniela H. Meadows and her co-authors asks us to finally stop moralizing feedback. The system is just telling you what your story edited out. A limit is information about form. The old self asks, how do I just push through? But the refined self asks, what does this pressure actually reveal? Here is the real cognitive upgrade. Before you intensify a goal, clearly name the stocks it drains and replenishes. Say it plainly out loud. This ambition drains sleep but must replenish craft. This speed drains trust but must replenish intimacy. Do that, and now the mind has handles, and the body finally stops screaming in the fog. The denied limit became the teacher. It taught through friction first, then through fatigue, and then through pattern. The question is not whether you should grow. The question is whether your growth has a form worthy of your life. And this is exactly what Limits to Growth demands we ask. Where has success become a delayed warning? Bring that question into your next choice. Let the limit try the architecture. Let feedback replace self-attack. Refine before the curve breaks. Deep dive the philosophy at upgowise.com. Because if self-mastery is systems mastery, what happens to your life when you finally stop fighting the feedback?